Good evening and welcome to Tunnel Vision, a show presented to you by USCFootball.com. I'm your host, Jack Smith, joined in studio by Ryan Abraham and Connor Morrissette, and we're going to break down USC's throttling, dismantling, huge win over Stanford in the Coliseum last night, 56-10. A not-so-fitting end to what is USC's longest rivalry and the first Pac-12 opener, or the last Pac-12 opener and the first Pac-12 game of the year for USC. It was all Trojans from the start, and it was really dominated by that first half in which USC went up 49-3 at the half, the third largest lead in Pac-12 conference history. For 100-plus years, it's the third highest margin of lead for any team in the entire conference. But I'm sure you guys have thoughts. Make sure you're leaving them in the comments wherever you're watching. We can put them on the screen. If you want to call in, either rant, talk about your experience at the Coliseum, or watching at home, you can call in at 512-4-TUNNEL, and we'll get to those towards the end of the show. Ryan, I know you want to talk about the USC-Stanford rivalry and the game that happened last night, so I'm just going to give you the floor.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. Welcome, Connor, Jack. And, I don't know, hopefully there's not too many rants after, that kind of dismantling. Just like the word I used on Twitter was merciless, and it just seemed like Lincoln Riley. I thought Troy Taylor maybe kicked his dog or something. There was no letting up, even to the very end, challenging a touchdown, the only touchdown that Stanford scored. I got a text like 10 minutes ago. Why did he challenge that final score? He didn't want to give up a touchdown. They were fighting till the end. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, like the stream, and you can subscribe over there too. But as Jack mentioned, I got a little opening rant to go with. I should have prepared a little, which I didn't. But I thought about this for a while. USC and Stanford, they started playing back in 1905. Jack mentioned the longest standing rivalry. The game goes back a long time. I was a freshman at USC back in 1989. You weren't around. You guys both weren't around. That's okay. My freshman year, coming from the East Coast, was not like growing up a USC football fan or anything. I was just a freshman at USC. Todd Moredovich was the quarterback. Shane Foley would come in a little bit. They played Jeff George in Illinois in their very first game, and they were up 13-0 and lost 14-13. But they won the Rose Bowl that year. It was really cool. Ricky Irvins. But they played Stanford. Denny Green was the head coach at Stanford at the time. They won 19-0. But there's a lot of back and forth over the years. There were some pretty bad Stanford teams and some bad USC teams. But I believe, just looking at the records from 1989 on, USC won 19 games against Stanford. Stanford won 17. There were times when USC was down, especially after Pete Carroll left and Jim Harbaugh. And you remember the "What's Your Deal" game, and David Shaw, and they won a lot of games. I mean, I mentioned being in the press box for the Pac-12 championship when Christian McCaffrey was running all over, and we could hear Justin Wilcox, the USC defensive coordinator, just screaming in the box next to us because we were right next to him. A lot of great moments to the rivalry. Just seeing the pageantry of the USC Trojan Marching Band and the Stanford Band, and the kind of halftime shows that the Stanford Band would perform, making fun of anything Los Angeles, anything Hollywood, anything USC, Varsity Blues, O.J. Simpson, whatever, they would do it all. They got that tree dancing around. My sister, who went to the University of San Diego, she's a couple years younger than me, would come up to go to USC games. She didn't like Notre Dame, she didn't like UCLA, but man, she hated Stanford. She hated the tree. She didn't know much about college football, but it meant something to her whenever we would go up to the Bay Area because one of her friends would live up there and go to the games, and man, did she hate when USC lost to Stanford. There was just something about it. It felt different. It was like there's the kind of Bay Area, LA, Bay Area thing going on. LA's sort of indifferent to anyone that's not themselves. San Francisco teams, no offense, Jack, they chant beat LA. LA fans don't chant beat San Francisco. They don't really care. But there was something about this Stanford and USC sort of connection, the weekender, all that kind of stuff. Going to the game on Saturday, yes, it was just a beatdown, a bludgeoning, 49-3 at halftime. It didn't look like they were playing the same sport, but it didn't feel the same. I was sad at the loss of the rivalry. It's not just because USC's going to the Big Ten and Stanford's going to the ACC. And the ACC might want to get their money back, I guess, after what they saw there. That was one of the tweets I had yesterday. But that's losing something, right? The weekender's gone. I get that, but even if this rivalry was going on, the feeling I got from this USC-Stanford game was not like what it used to be before. Looking around, sitting next to RJ, who went to Stanford, graduated from Stanford, Where's the Stanford band? Didn't even come. Now, sometimes it'd be fun because the Stanford band didn't come because I think one time at a Notre Dame game, they made fun of the Irish potato famine that killed millions of people or whatever. You can't do that stuff. So they get banned. They would get banned for making jokes that were inappropriate or whatever. And that's why they wouldn't be there. It just seems like now they don't care. Like, the reason they weren't there is because there's much less. They just don't care. Like, college football's changed, and Stanford and David Shaw, for sure, didn't really want to be part of that change. We've seen USC change. NIL is a big part of things. The transfer portal. Stanford's just not doing that. And I feel like, back-to-back 3-9 seasons, not even firing any coaches. It took forever to get some kind of change there. It seems like Stanford doesn't care about this college football world much anymore, and you could just feel it there. I mean, Connor, a Syracuse grad, some guy that couldn't get on the field at Syracuse was playing quarterback for Stanford. Like, that doesn't. How much sense does that make? Like, they had Andrew freaking Luck, and now you got some cast off from Syracuse. Like, it doesn't seem like Stanford cares anymore. And it was almost like you have this new UFC fighter coming in, and they were fighting this for pay-per-view, some like a George Foreman boxer over his prime that just can't even move, and then the young guy just beats the crap out of him, and you get a satisfaction out of that. Like, no, it's not very satisfying. I don't want the rivalry to go out this way. Like, yeah, if you're a USC fan, you get to beat some team that beat you. I'm sure you have bad memories of Stanford beating you, the 41-point favorite and all that kind of stuff, whatever it was. So yeah, you don't feel bad, but I feel bad that the rivalry feels like it's just died. It didn't feel like someone came out on top. It just felt like one team passed away. They just fell off the face of the earth, and it was like they wasn't there. And one of the coolest things as a student when I was at USC, learning about this and watching, the halftime shows, here's the Stanford band, and you're like, how could these super smart people be dressed up like idiots and just running around the field, acting like morons? And then this tree jumping around, and this school has $50 billion in endowments and all the academic accolades and all this stuff. And here's what the band is. There was just something kind of unique about it. You don't even see it. And then the USC band, all buttoned up, would do the Stanford countermarch, which was one of the cooler ones that you would see, where you would see the whole band kind of in a boring sort of formation, and then they would one part of it would stop and jumping around and stuff, and then they go right back in line. It was really cool. It was like a great sort of counterpunch to the weird stuff that Stanford was doing. That's just something that made this kind of a fun. And football players probably never see that stuff, but you would in the press box, or you would as a student or as a fan. And none of that was there. They had an amazing drone show. I thought that was really cool. They had the band playing and the drones and all that stuff. But USC Stanford, that Stanford countermarch and the Stanford band going bananas, that was a big part of what this was. And it just didn't feel like it was the same. It was like a shell of what the rivalry used to be. And to me, that's kind of sad. I mean, I love the fact that the Pac-12 is doing well this year. But USC Stanford, there was something there. And I had Shotgun text me. He was like, is that really a rival? And I think it is. It's a rival, but it's a series that's been played a really long time, and it's got its own unique qualities, different than UCLA, different than Notre Dame, but unique nonetheless. And there's a lot of history there. And to see that sort of just kind of go up in smoke, it just made me kind of sad. So sorry for the long sort of rant there. But it just felt like a little piece of college football died on Saturday night as USC just steamrolled, literally said, merciless, beating the pulp out of, the dead horse was dead. It was just, there was nothing else you could do. So, I mean, the fact that Traveler had to stop running because he was so tired in the first half, I mean, come on, Stanford. That's how you want this to go out? That's your final, come on. I don't like it.
Well, Stanford died. Stanford passed away, like you said, but USC killed him.
Yeah.
I don't think Clay Helton coached USC does anything close to what happened yesterday. So while I totally get what you're saying, Ryan, I looked at USC last night, and it's against Stanford, who's terrible. Stanford did beat Hawaii. Hawaii's not good, but it's not like they're the bottom of the barrel in terms of Power 5 teams, or in terms of Division I teams, not Power 5. And what USC did last night, firing on all cylinders in all three phases in that first half with that first team, that to me was very impressive. Not a very good opponent in Stanford, of course, but to me, I leave last night thinking, okay, I thought USC could make the college football playoff. I leave last night saying they should make the college football playoff. They're the best team in the Pac-12. And on a night when Washington made some mistakes, Utah against Baylor struggled, not having their starting quarterback hurts, of course, but, they didn't look very good. Another game in the Pac-12, Oregon Texas Tech. I just thought USC looks so clearly better than everyone else in the conference, and that can change. Time can change. You don't want to peak too soon. But I left last night thinking it's USC's Pac-12 to lose, and they should make the playoff.
Yeah, right. I mean, we have similar stories. I mean, growing up in the Bay Area, when USC would come out to play, like that would be the only time I'd be able to go watch a USC game is when they'd come and they'd play Cal or Stanford in the Bay Area. So every other year they'd roll into Stanford Stadium and they'd play Stanford. And really that was a game where maybe one team was better every year, but you never really knew going into a USC-Stanford game. And I made my prediction on Thursday night in the studio, and I said, I think Stanford's going to show up. Maybe they're not going to be a great team this year, but this is a rivalry game, and they'll show up under the Coliseum lights. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. I kind of said it this morning. If you told me it was going to be the best USC team of all time versus the worst Stanford team of all time, I still would have said it is impossible to have a 49-3 score at halftime. You never really expect that from USC Stanford, and I think the best way to put it is it just didn't look like USC Stanford out on the field yesterday. And I know Trojan fans are probably pretty happy about that because in the last day with your ex now, you get the big win. You're the one that goes out with the victory. You can kind of hold the bragging rights. You've won the season series, or I guess really the series all time, and you get that emphatic last win. But I think you're right. It is a little bit of a bittersweet moment because this rivalry deserved far more than what Stanford put out on the field yesterday, and it deserves a good game. And yesterday you got a good game from USC, but it was far from a good football game in general.
No, I think that's a great way to put it, Jack, that the rivalry deserved more than whatever that was. I don't know what it was. I mean, I'm in the press box, and I'm like, what are we going to do? Like, okay, I mean, I can film revisiting my three keys. Like, nothing really matters. They're just absolutely...
You could have filmed it at halftime.
Yeah. You could have done whatever you wanted. You could have, went home. It does... I love the way you put that. The rivalry deserved better than whatever that was. And, maybe it was just me being a little optimistic that Troy Taylor had turned things around. It got very stale. With David Shaw. Like, you can't go 3-9 and not fire anybody. And they let David Shaw do that. He finally resigns. They bring in Troy Taylor. They're recruiting well. They get a win against Hawaii. I'm like you, Jack. I'm like, okay, I think they have a pulse. They're going to be better. And, man, they were pulseless in that game. It didn't help that Ashton Daniels went down, but, I mean, it didn't look like he was going to do much either. So it's a little sad. It's still sad to me.
One example of Stanford being pulseless was on the Caleb Williams touchdown run. The 10-yard line, Caleb clearly shows, hey, I'm going to run through the Stanford defensive back. You can either push me out of bounds, tackle me, or you can just get steamrolled. And the guy, I didn't even think made that good of an effort to even push Caleb Williams out of bounds or tackle him. And I think in that moment, it would, maybe you don't want to say, okay, it's over because that was so early in the game, but that kind of told me all I needed to know. You get a free shot at the reigning Heisman winner. You get a chance to hit the quarterback in a game where hitting the quarterback can lead to some great things and it's really hard to do. You get a free shot at him and chance to maybe slow down USC a little bit, not give him a chance to score, and you just lay down. I think that was a prime example of Stanford being pulseless, and there was a bunch of other examples too, but that kind of showed me everything I needed to know. So to your point too, the rivalry, it did deserve a better finish, but that's Stanford's fault. I mean, the talent gap is huge, but they looked like they were not ready to compete from the second kickoff started. They went into that game psyched out, and I think that was obvious from the first series.
I think Brendan Rice mentioned it, right, that he was sort of just getting out of the way and letting Caleb go through him. And then if you're check out our YouTube channel, Connor and I interviewed Taj Washington through the House of Victory a little bit earlier today, and one of the things that he's very insightful, by the way. Like, sometimes he'll give some short questions, answers in interviews, but really insightful stuff if you're listening to what he has to say. And he's like, you can tell when you're blocking. Like, it's a big deal to block as wide receivers. If you're blocking, you can really tell if the person you're blocking gives a crap or not. And it just sounded like, from what he was saying, Stanford didn't give a crap. So it's sad. I think it deserved more, but you could tell that was just not. They were not into this one for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think we expected USC is the better team. Physically, they're more talented, they're more athletic, but it just looked like Stanford showed up and they didn't care about getting pushed around. I mean, you had Bear Alexander on every play, 5 yards deep in the backfield because he's just pushing the guy in front of him. It didn't even take, at some point, a whole ton of technique because Stanford it just felt like they did not show up to play the same sport as USC. Things slowed down in the second half. You can ask Lincoln Riley about it, and he said after the game, like, USC was trying to toe a line to try and figure out, how respectful they should be in the second half, which that isn't something that should be uttered around the USC-Stanford rivalry. Like, this is a rivalry where the two teams go at each other. They're both normally very good. Stanford, even in their bad years, you would say this is a physical football team. Like, they will still run the ball. They're going to push you around. They might not score. They might not play well enough on defense, but they're always going to have that mentality that, hey, we're strong intellectually and physically, and it just showed up, and they just did not match up. The bodies for USC were just pushing around the Cardinal, and I think that Taj Washington kind of quote that he had really just sums it up, where when they figured out that Stanford didn't care about how they were being blocked and they just realized that they could have their way, they just decided, well, if we can have our way, why should we slow down at all? And you look up at halftime, and that's how you put up 49 points. USC was getting everything they wanted, and they didn't slow down for the first 30 minutes. And then I think they took their foot off the gas pedal. There's no arguing about that. But clearly for the first half, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, the defense, the special teams knew they could do whatever they wanted, and they kind of just did until they were up by so much.
Yeah, Ryan in the chat brought up a point about, how could, he said, how come the Stanford band and mascot weren't there for the last game? And I didn't even think about that aspect of it. Like, normally something like this, there would have been all these, Stanford band would have done this halftime show about like money raining from the sky, USC leaving for the money for the Big Ten. Like, they were just made fun of USC nonstop. It would have been like entertaining. And like the fact that this is the last time these guys are going to play for who knows how long, and there was nothing. And I never got a good answer. I think RJ was checking on it, why the Stanford band wasn't there. If anybody in the chat knows, if you read anything. So sorry for the long rant on that. But yeah, Ryan just pointed that out in the chat. I'm like, yeah, dude, this is the last one. They would always come up with something topical. You don't always like it, but there were so many opportunities for something here, and they didn't get to do it.
Was it because the students aren't in school yet? That was my only possible thought.
That's RJ did mention that the students are in school, but I mean, you can do something. Like, I don't know. It was sad.
Did you guys take anything away from USC though? Because I think in that game, yeah, Stanford is terrible, but I left being really impressed with USC, and it changed the ceiling that I thought I had for this team coming into the year. I really was that impressed with it, and I think we can start to talk about Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, their potential to be an all-time play caller quarterback duo in college football history. USC, 3 games, 3 bad teams. I get it. I think they're going to continue to do really well offensively against the better teams on their schedule. This offense is really, really good. They figured out their offensive line. It looks like Caleb Williams had all day. I expect the offensive line to have a good season. I really think this offense could be generational.
Yeah, I think you could take away that USC is really freaking good. And I think the defense looks better, right? So they almost made the playoff with a crap defense last year. And then maybe the defense isn't perfect. Like, I don't know where they're going to be ranked. But it's significantly better. Like, you're getting disruption up front. The offense is better. Like, Marshawn Lloyd's going to be an absolute stud. Taj Washington's leading the team in receiving yards, and they can just throw it to any guy they want, and it's fine. And Brendan Rice he catches one ball a game, and it's a touchdown. It's like, okay, there's so much you can do there. So yes, I agree with you. Like, the takeaway is you can only beat who's in front of you. There were 3 not-so-great teams in front of USC, and they walloped them all. Like, we've seen good teams struggle against mediocre to bad teams, and we've seen them lose in some of these. So the fact that you've walloped everybody, that's great. And, I talked to Harvey Hyde this morning. We put up a podcast. He's concerned, USC hasn't been tested yet, which is true. It's a little bit different when someone punches you back. When you get hit in the mouth, what Mike Tyson is like, everyone has a plan to get punched in the face or punched in the mouth or whatever it is. And USC hasn't been punched in the face yet. Like, San Jose State, had a couple plays, but outside of that, it hasn't happened. But the takeaway would be they look like the best team in the conference to me. And I know some people didn't want to pick them, and we didn't even have them at USC as like the number 1 team in our power rankings for the Podcast of Champions, but they will be after this week. Who
was?
We had Oregon State. They look good. They look really good too. But USC was meh. They were okay against San Jose State. I guess they didn't cover the spread. But winning by 52, winning by 46 or whatever. Like, okay, like I don't know. There's a conference game, you win by 46. So yeah, like they look like. So the takeaway is they look like the best team. So sorry for the long, like, sad that Stanford stinks rant, but
no, it's okay. And it's just, I mean, they just have pros on their team. Caleb Williams is a pro. Marshawn Lloyd is a pro. Jonah Monheim is a pro. Dorian Singer is a pro. Taj Washington is a pro. On defense, Bear Alexander, pro. Kalen Bullock is a pro. To be really, really good in college football, it helps when you have a bunch of future professionals on the team. And I thought all of your future professionals last night made plays that made me think, okay, these guys are NFL bound. These guys are the real deal. And yeah, it's against Stanford. And I'm going to keep saying, and I'm repeating myself, I got to stop repeating myself all the time on these shows. They're so good. And that, to me, like against San Jose State, I wasn't impressed. And then, okay, maybe they treated it like an exhibition. I get it. They ramped up against Stanford. And what did they do? They could have won 100-0.
Yeah.
I think the big takeaway for me is that we have seen good games under Lincoln Riley, and we've seen good games from position groups. We've seen, maybe the defense itself didn't have a great day, but like the defensive line had a really nice day against Nevada. The linebackers had a good day, but the secondary struggled. I thought yesterday was at least in the Lincoln Riley era, the best team game that USC has played. Everyone on the offense was working in full sync. We're used to that. But then everyone on the defense was playing together. And then not only was it, those sides were working well with each other, they were working well kind of cross sides as well. So when the offense would play well, the defense would respond, get them the ball back. Then the offense would go score. The defense would get a stop. Then there's a special teams touchdown. And it's like every piece was just feeding off each other. They were feeding off the crowd, which was insane as well. At least 70,000 people had to be in attendance, filling up corners of the Coliseum that haven't been filled in a little while. I felt like not only were they playing together, they were playing with the entire 70 players that got on the field. Everyone kind of was going for that same mission. They all felt like they were doing everything at the same time with the same goal instead of playing like position groups or individuals. It just felt like one big team, and I think that's what allowed them to get out so far ahead. And then they didn't stop once they were up by a little bit. And Lincoln Riley's team last year, and I think it's different because the talent maybe wasn't there at some different position groups and everything like that, but there would be games where USC is the better team. They're the more talented team. They're the more physical team. They should blow this team out. And then they just wouldn't. It would be close. You can look at that Cal game, the Arizona game, which is a little different because of some of the referee decisions that went on in that one. But there were games that we said going in, USC should win this game by a lot. You would watch the first half and say, USC should win this game by a lot. And then all of a sudden, Caleb Williams has to make a run on third down to win the game late for USC to win by 1 score or 10 points, something like that. And they haven't had a game like that this year yet because they've just been really putting their foot to the gas and speeding off until there's no doubt. They're not leaving any question in the mind of the people watching. And RJ Abadia, I think, summed this up perfectly in the article that he wrote last night, and it's on the website, uscfootball.com, if you want to go read it. Like, they have developed that killer instinct, which good teams are able to go out there and win every game, even against the bad teams. Great teams are the ones that they just show you how good they are, no matter how good you are on the other side. They will play just as well against the number one team in the nation as they will against the worst team in the nation, and they won't feel bad about it.
It was relentless, merciless, like we talked about. They weren't going to let up, and then in the second half, kind of empty the bench. It was over at that point. I mean, it's like the fight's over. Okay, now you're just going to get reps for your backup guys. And Lincoln Riley still wasn't happy. He didn't like the way the offensive line played, but I do like, and I addressed this sort of in the 3 keys to victory. You're going to beat Stanford, but there's things you want to show. Like, hey, we're going to improve that. Like week 1, the USC secondary had a lot of penalties, and they improved that in week 2. They didn't get that. And we didn't see it in week 3 either. But week 2, game 2, the offensive line had 5 penalties. They had some issues. There were some bad snaps. So I wanted to see the offensive line play cleaner. And they did. They did well. Ben Uresic is a great tight end. Like he could hurt you. USC's been hurt by tight ends. Limit his production. They were able to do that. Oh, you got an athletic quarterback. Don't let the quarterback position run all over you. They ran the ball like 17 times out of the quarterback spot and averaged like 2.3 yards a carry or something. So the things that like, oh, this is something that's been an issue, sort of like a talking point. You could check it off. Like, nope, we're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let that happen. So I felt like, Jack, you're right. Like they addressed things, and Lincoln Riley said it was all 3 sides of the game, I think that's the word he used. They played well in special teams. And I have someone that harps on special teams a lot, and he went out of his way to talk about the blocking was really good, and they were 1 penalty away from getting a second return for a touchdown. But yeah, I felt like they did exactly what you needed to do against an overmatched opponent. Sometimes you just don't even know what to think when it's just that bad. It's like, how bad could it? This is really, really bad. But they did everything. The good thing for USC is they did everything right, and that's why it was that bad, or a big part of the reason.
Do you want to know what the stat of the night is for me?
Okay.
Caleb Williams played 39 snaps, and USC scored 49 points. So every snap that he took, USC averaged over a point per snap. It's football. It's supposed to be hard. Oh, my goodness. That is nuts.
Yeah, they had over 400 yards in the first half. Like, it was just like, okay. I remember, like, when they were going over that, I'm like, I had the tweet ready. I'm like, USC just went over 400 yards, and it's the second quarter.
When Williams connected with Rice for the touchdown, it was like, I tweeted the gif, throw the damn towel, like, stop the fight. It's over. It was like beating a dead horse. And Traveler, speaking of horses, couldn't even run. Like you mentioned, it was so tired. Oh, man. So, yeah, Stanford stinks, but USC's pretty good. I think
that's a great way to sum it up. Stanford bad, USC good.
It wasn't even like a blowout. Like this is history where this is the most points USC has ever scored against Stanford. The most coming in was 54, and they put up 49 in the first half. If they didn't stop, they could have gotten to 70, 80. You
100. I think they could have gotten to 100.
They could have potentially gotten to 100. A lot of things went right to allow them to get 49 in the first half, but with the amount that they were wearing down Stanford, maybe they could have gotten to 100. The 46-point halftime lead was the third highest lead for any Pac-12 team in the conference's history. Like, this is 100-plus years that we're talking about a Pac-12 football, and that's the third highest halftime margin for a given team. Like, it was just a different brand of football. I think it's up there with you can pretty much pick out any half. Maybe the context is different because Stanford obviously isn't a great team, but it's up there for one of the best halves USC football has ever played of all time. Statistically, it has to be one of the best halves in college football history. I mean, just putting up a 50-burger basically in one half is crazy considering how many games last year we were like, well, does USC score 50 this game? And they put it up in 30 minutes.
Yeah, we pick against the spread, and I thought USC would. I thought Stanford would cover. Like they'll win by like 4 touchdowns, but just not cover like the 29. And it was just motoring through there. Like sometimes, and you're watching a game for the spread, and it's a big part of college sports now, and it's a big spread you got to cover. You don't score at the end of half. All those little things you have to do. Like USC did exactly everything you needed to do, like to try to cover a big spread. Like they got stop every time. They punted once. It was just like there was like some deep balls on 3rd and 3. You're like, what are they doing there? But they could, if they just ran the ball up the middle, they would have scored a touchdown on that drive too. I think they were just trying to do things, but no matter what they did, it was like this is going to be a huge play, and then you're like, oh, maybe Stanford could get a stop here and score. And it's like Caleb Williams, Brendan Rice, 75 yards, boom. It's like there was nothing. There was just nothing you could do. I don't know if any of us saw it going like that way, but man, it was that was crazy.
Shotgun said USC might score 70, and they definitely could have if they kept the offense.
Yeah, he was big on it. All right. Yeah.
So, yeah, Jack and I both picked USC to cover, and I got to shout out USC 75 bio on the Peristyle because he commented on your post where we all predicted the spreads. Finally get to identify the losers on the staff. USC will separate themselves this week. Maybe then the losers will become believers.
It's not about believers. Do you understand? It's like a point spread. Like they're like this is not.
I just wanted to get you.
I didn't think USC was going to win. Like I knew USC was going to win. I just think they were going to cover that big of a point spread. But
when I miss on my next spread, please hold my feet to the fire.
Sure. Yeah.
I think my score prediction was 48-17, or I think I said 48-17, which is still them covering, and they scored more points in the first half than I thought they'd score for the entire game.
And I think the 17, I thought it would be like 49-24. Like I thought, that's a lot of points, 7 touchdowns to score. That's plenty against a rival, and you give up a touchdown here, touchdown there, maybe a late touchdown. Stanford scored 14 points against USC in the fourth quarter last year. USC didn't score. Stanford outscored USC 14-0 in the fourth quarter. You're like, something like that, backdoor kind of cover. Nope, like there was nothing. So that's like, what do you say? Like the defense did really well because you could see a game like this. It's a blowout, but you give up 24 and not 3 until the very end. Like that's to me that's a great sign for this defense that even though it's an overmatched team, they still were able to not even let them get close. Would you still feel really good if it was 56-24? Like, yeah, you just beat the crap out of Stanford, but 56-10 is it's like a whole nother thing. Like you're just not even letting them score at all, and you took out your starters and you played 30 minutes without them, and it still didn't. You only gave up one score that Lincoln Riley thought still wasn't a score when he was challenging it. So that's to me, if you want to get a takeaway, like that's pretty impressive for the defense that they didn't give up much of anything.
We did talk too about some of the matchups that USC would have to face. David Bailey, a great edge rusher for Stanford, he didn't do anything in this game. So shout out to Michael Tarquin, who at right tackle was blocking him for most of the game. That was really encouraging. Ben Urosic had a couple catches, but Kalen Bullock broke up that 4th and goal pass from either Lamson, I think it was, not Daniels. He was out at that point to eliminate a potential score for Stanford. And Stanford had a cornerback who has a bright future who didn't do much. So in this game, we talked about these matchups that we were going to watch, and USC just blew freaking doors, and it didn't even matter.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I think Lincoln Riley had a pretty nice game plan because I think he realized David Bailey is the one player that can wreck things for us offensively, and he just neutralized him. From the jump, he said, we're not going to let David Bailey beat us. They did everything horizontally at the plane of the line of scrimmage. Didn't even really try and throw the ball vertically at all and give Bailey a chance to rush the passer. It was a lot of motion, moving from left to right. Basically, Caleb Williams was either dumping the ball off at the line of scrimmage, running himself, and then throwing a little bit downfield. Like, they never gave David Bailey a real chance to get any kind of normal pass rush off. And one time they played into his aggression on Marshawn Lloyd's touchdown run. If you go back and watch the replay, they let David Bailey take a clean shot at Caleb Williams if he wanted it. He over pursued, and Lloyd just ran right by him, and David Bailey just whips his head around as Lloyd runs into the end zone. So I thought they did a really good job game planning. They realized, here's the threat on defense for Stanford. It's David Bailey on the edge. What do you do to neutralize an edge rusher? You get him moving left and right instead of forward, and I think they really did a good job neutralizing him. Never really gave him a chance. And then when they were tired, the offense didn't give him much time on the sideline. Caleb Williams comes back out. They move him to the right, and they just throw a 75-yard bomb to Brendan Rice. It's like, well, you've been going horizontal on us all day long, so we're going to try and play that. Well, now you've got the son of Jerry Rice, who he claims to be the fastest player on the team, and you have to defend him one-on-one as he's trying to go deep. And I thought they did a really good job game planning and then just not letting their foot off the gas pedal in the first half, because they definitely could have when they were up by, I think, 35 at the time they threw that bomb. And you're like, well, this game is already over. Is USC just going to kind of go into the half? No, they came out and they threw a 75-yard play to start a drive to score another touchdown to go up by 42 points in the first half.
Yeah. David Bailey, you heard his name a little bit, but it was mostly like making tackles out in the flat. So I think they schemed him so if your best pass rusher is making tackles that at the sidelines, that's pretty good. So he's not coming after your quarterback. And like Jack mentioned, if he does, you can beat him with another way. So I thought they game planned that really well. But you meant there's names. Stanford has guys that are going to be playing at the next level, and none of them really made an impact in this one.
People will roll their eyes, but it's 2 weeks in a row. Lincoln Riley has had a brilliant game plan against Nevada. He said, we're going to throw it. We're going to throw it down the field, throw, and they win 66-14, I think. That was the final score. So, I mean, that was impressive. And then, Jack, you just nailed that analysis. Was great. David Bailey's a home wrecker. Let's do a lot of stuff sideline to sideline, and let's get guys in space. And what's so interesting, it's fascinating to watch USC. If you double team one receiver, someone will be open. You can't do it. Everyone has to go man to man, or if you play zone, you have to be perfect guarding your territory. And USC, they're going to be able to just make so many open plays because breakdowns are going to happen with all the talent that they have at the skill spots. So many guys return from last year. So Lincoln Riley talks so much about being in year two. So many of these skill guys are in year two. Just keep going just keep watching, not going, because I think the best is yet to come. They're on the upward trajectory for sure.
Yep.
Well, and the funny thing is they've got all the momentum in the world. Maybe the best 3-game stretch to start a season for USC in quite some time. And you could make the argument in history. Now they get a bye week, which is it's interesting. They've got that early season bye. I'm sure if you ask the guys, they're like, well, coming off that win, do you want to play next week? They'd probably say yes, but I'm sure they'll take the rest and then they'll go into that hard stretch. Before we kind of move on to questions and callers, are there any specific players you guys want to highlight from yesterday? I know that we've talked kind of a lot about just the team in general because it did feel like such a team-played game, but were there any individual performances that really stood out to you guys?
I think like Marshawn Lloyd, we did our picks for MVP, and I was like, he had a touchdown, and then he had a second touchdown called back for a penalty, but he was up there. I think he would have been, potential. And they, Austin Jones, it was great to see him sort of get another touchdown against his former team. But I love the way the running backs are looking, and you haven't needed them. No one's getting like 15 carries or anything like that, but you might get into a game where it's just like, hey, you got to run the football. And I thought the holes have been good, and these guys are running hard. Marshawn Lloyd he just looks like a different kind of dude when he's running the football. So I would say, yeah, he's someone to kind of watch going forward. It was my MVP pick. I was like, come on, and he didn't get that second touchdown.
I start with Caleb Williams, and I wrote about this after the game. Some of the touchdown passes are incredible, but the creative arm angles that he has, and he did it last year, but he just looks improved. The fact that he can throw a ball sidearm and it goes around an oncoming defender instead of over, where it would potentially get batted down or even worse, intercepted. He's making these plays that, okay, I can see why he's going to be the number one pick in the draft. I understand. And him and Coach Riley just being on the same page, the synergy between the play caller and the quarterback is exceptional. And I think as the year goes on, I really believe that they'll go down as one of the best partnerships of all time. So I start with Caleb Williams because, man, was I impressed with him. He just, in all facets, looks so good. Defensively, Bear Alexander, the push he made on that first series that led to the Max Williams interception. Are you kidding me? He burst right through that offensive line. You didn't see many plays like that last year. I think the defense being a lot more talented overall leads to Solomon Byrd having some matchups that maybe he wouldn't otherwise have, and he's really taking advantage of those. Him on one end, Jamil Muhammad on another end is a pretty dangerous combination, so I look at those two guys. I didn't think Stanford was a very serious football team throwing the ball, so I don't really have too many takeaways from the secondary. I think it's fair to have takeaways, even though Stanford isn't very good, from the defensive front. I thought the linebackers played well. I thought the defensive line played really well for the second game in a row, and against an inferior opponent. That's really encouraging. So overall, those are, when you ask that question, Jack, that's what comes to mind for me. But I start with Caleb and then some guys on the defense.
Yeah, I think it has really stood out across the last 2 weeks that, we knew Caleb Williams was the best player on the offense coming in, and we knew that USC had more talent on defense, and you're kind of wondering, okay, but, who's the Caleb Williams with the defense? I think it's Bear Alexander. I think he's by far the most talented player on that defense. He has made the biggest impact through a couple weeks. There have been good players. Kalen Bullock is a potential first-round pick, one of the better free safeties in college football. Jamil Muhammad has been money off the edge, but Bear Alexander is just different, and you kind of feel his presence on every play. And when there's a team that has an offensive line that isn't the strongest, he just knows he's going to push you over. He had a play against Nevada where he just picked the center up and moved him to the side and said, well, I want to go after the quarterback now, so get out of my way. And he had just plays against Stanford where he would just push forward through the line. And on that one play on the Max Williams interception, it was a play action, so Ashton Daniels had his back turned to the line of scrimmage. He didn't even finish his drop, and Bear Alexander was 5 yards past the original line of scrimmage, really just almost hugging him already before Daniels finished his drop. So all he did was kind of spin around and fling it to the sideline, and Max Williams was there to make the interception. So it was complimentary football, and Bear Alexander is a player that across the last 3 weeks, even though he hasn't shown up on the stat sheet a whole ton, at least the conventional one for sacks and TFLs, he's made a big impact. I think PFF said that going into the game, he had the most pressures for an interior D lineman in all of college football with 8. Had a lot more yesterday, and I think that he's kind of that one player that's been showing up. I thought the secondary played a lot better yesterday than they did across the first 2 games. I think that was kind of them stepping up after hearing the criticism. They played the ball really well in the air. That's something Dan Weber said on Instant Analysis yesterday, that they were watching the ball, they saw it, and they kind of were turning around to it more than they had in the first couple of weeks, slapping it away, ripping it out of hands. That play by Kalen Bullock in the end zone was exceptional against Benjamin Jurasik. He just pulled it out of his hands on 4th down, and that's not a play that USC makes last year. There was that play late in the Cotton Bowl where, just the throw over the middle in the end zone. USC tried to do that to rip it out, but Tulane was able to hold on and ended up winning the game. But it was just a little bit of a different play there from Kalen Bullock. I thought Christian Roland Wallace had a similar play. Max Williams obviously had a good day. Damani Jackson, you didn't hear his name quite as much, and I think that is sometimes a good thing. With corners, if they're quiet, that means that they're covering guys a little bit better. They're not getting targeted quite as much. I thought the secondary stepped up a whole lot. And then you saw that linebacker rotation. I don't think anyone specifically stood out. You had Rajon Davis with a nice play against Jurasik early in the game. Eric Gentry had a couple nice tackles, but I thought, when the linebackers are playing well, you don't hear their names quite as much either because they're not missing tackles. They're not getting lost in coverage. So I thought it was overall a good day for the defense, but it's kind of Bear Alexander, Kalen Bullock were the guys that really stood out to me.
And I want shout out to the offensive line. I actually went to a little event earlier today, so it's kind of interesting, the whole NIL world. The fact that we interviewed Rajon Davis last week, and we got to do Taj Washington this week through House of Victory. The collective that helps a lot of these USC athletes. The offensive line is actually sponsored by Athletic Brewing Company, which is a non-alcoholic brewery, San Diego and I think North Carolina. But they had an event at Topgolf today, and Connor wasn't able to make it, so I went over there and fun. It was fun hanging out with the guys. So Gino Quinones did show up. He had like a cane. Getting through there.
I shouldn't laugh at that.
No, it's like so. But I didn't think he would come.
That.
He was supposed to be there, but I didn't think he would come. But he had the surgery and he was there. But Jonah Monheim and Justin Dietich and Michael Tarquin and I'm blanking on the other
Monheim, Dietich, Tarquin,
Kingston,
Jared Kingston. Sorry, sorry, it's like blank on one of the names there. But so those 5 guys were there. Signing autographs and doing stuff, and then we went up and hit a few balls. I don't think anyone, were winning any golf competitions, but Kingston was probably the better golfer of the ones. But Monheim, big dude, he took some mighty cuts at some of those. But it was cool to see them, and then it was funny. So I hung out with them, and we were just chatting, and I took pictures. I think Jack probably put the picture up there if you watch it on YouTube, and it was cool. And it's fun to kind of see them doing these events that they could actually get compensated for. And at the end, they were all given these contracts, and I didn't look at what they said, but you're signing something. So they did their appearance, and they get paid for it. And I was talking to one of the guys, and they're like, it's fun to do. He said he likes dealing with these college athletes because a lot of them, or most of them, don't have agents. He goes, sometimes it's hard to get, you guys have agents and they can't even show up to things and stuff. And he said the college guys are very respectful and they're showing up to what they're supposed to do. So it's kind of cool to just get a feel for that and just chat with those guys, about hey, you didn't have to play in the second half. And Dietich was telling me, he wanted to look at his, for 3 games, the number of snaps he's played. He thinks that's a low for how many snaps he had to play through 3 games because they, didn't play one half of one, a quarter and a half of another, and at least a quarter of the other one. So it's kind of interesting from there. There's a little less wear and tear on their bodies and stuff too because they don't have to play as much. But it was just a cool little thing. I just wanted to share the kind of experience that was there and kind of see sort of this behind the scenes, some of the NIL stuff that they do.
Gotta love NIL opportunities for linemen too.
Yes.
We see Zachariah Branch get a little run because he's having such a good start to the season as a true freshman and as a guy who scores touchdowns, but it's nice to see the O-linemen get compensated as well because they're doing that dirty work.
I guess I think Texas and Florida State and USC are the 3 offensive lines that Athletic Brewing sponsors. So they've done different events like that. So it was kind of fun.
Well, for the people that are superstitious at all, Texas and Florida State have some big ranked wins. So if they're going off that, then maybe one is in USC's future. But I think that's what people want NIL to look like, is those kind of events where the players, they show up, people are able to interact, and then they get compensated for that. That world of NIL is much better than the one where high school recruits want money to go on a visit.
Yeah.
That's not what NIL is for. NIL is for this other stuff where they're given their time, they're out there for the public, and then they're getting compensated based on that. But we've got a couple of callers to get to, and I'm sure that the thoughts are going to be absolutely incredible this week. Just another PSA. We said it last week. Make your thoughts quick, under a minute, please. And if you have questions, tell us you have a question. But also, if you want to just kind of give us your thoughts about last night's game, feel free. But we'll go to our first caller. Not sure the name, but hi, caller. You're on Tunnel Vision.
Hi, this is Brandon from Minnesota. Just want to give a quick shout out to Grant. She's been calling a great game the past few games, so shout out to him. And the hate should quiet down, I hope. But my question is, if USC, Georgia, Texas, Florida State, and Michigan go undefeated, who are you picking for the CFP?
Okay, so Georgia, you're in. Georgia's in. Even though they have if you just look at this year, their schedule is the weakest, but they're 2-time national champion. They're in. They're not being left out. Florida State just got a big win. I think USC's record or schedule would stand up with any of them if they go undefeated because there's 8 ranked teams in the Pac-12 right now. So that helps for sure.
What were the teams?
He said
Michigan,
Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, Texas, USC. First of all, I will say I have a hard time imagining that as a possibility. We've never, I don't think, seen 5 like pure blue blood D1 programs go undefeated in the same year. Like it just doesn't happen, especially with conference title games. I think if I had to pick, because it's a hypothetical scenario, Georgia, Michigan, and USC are all in. And then because I think it's the ACC and that's the conference that kind of gets the most disrespect nowadays, I'd say Florida State gets left out. I think Texas would get in based on kind of name value. And I do think they're going to have a harder schedule, especially if Clemson drops a couple games this year. That's limiting, a big win potentially for Florida State, especially since both of those wins, LSU and Clemson, would come very early in the season for the Noles. I think they'd kind of get
Florida stinks too, right? Like that's a big rival. They stink.
I don't know if they've got North Carolina on the schedule. Like maybe that's who they'd come across in the championship game. But like I think they're going to get their wins early. And even if they go undefeated, like everyone else is going to have the wins late. USC is going to have those. Georgia's going to win the SEC championship game, which they're going to be playing a pretty highly ranked team. Michigan will have beaten Ohio State and Penn State at least once each. And I think that Florida State would have those early wins, but they'd kind of get lost in the sauce in the conversation as the year went on. So that would be my pick for the 4. But
that's like a tortoise and a hare thing. Like they're the hare right now, but
I think if you just say any one of those teams goes undefeated this year, they're in the playoff, because I doubt that there's going to be all 5 of them undefeated.
Georgia, Texas, Michigan would be in for sure, and then it would be down to USC and Florida State, pretty much what Jack said. I thought that was good analysis. And we'll see. Florida State, if LSU ends up having a better year after getting dominated by Florida State, maybe that win looks really good. But yeah, I mean, I might pick USC to be the team that would be out in that situation, but I don't know. I think
over Texas,
Texas beat Alabama.
Okay, they beat Alabama, who's probably not going to be that great. They don't have a quarterback.
Texas's wins, they'd be Alabama. You get Oklahoma later in the year.
The Big 12 has lost a whole bunch of games to the Pac-12 already.
It's Texas. They're above USC in the poll right now.
That's right now. They're not going to have the opportunities to they were not going to beat Notre Dame on the road and then Oregon on the road and Washington at home. And
if Texas is undefeated, they're making it.
I think USC's ahead of Texas.
I would agree. I think honestly, if you have all those 5 teams, and we won't know, what's the quality of win like.
This is a great talk show debate. I love this.
Yeah. We don't know what the quality of win like, but say all these 5 teams win the rest of their games by the same margin. I wouldn't be surprised if USC would have the number 1 college football playoff ranking. They would have had easily the most ranked wins based on how it is right now, with 8 ranked teams in the Pac-12. I wouldn't be surprised if all those teams go undefeated. Like USC's schedule, if they go undefeated, I wouldn't be surprised if they're number 1, just because of how hard it's going to be to go undefeated.
Yeah. We'll see, but I mean,
I certainly
there's just not a lot of
I don't think
over
the Big
Texas
12 is down
over Georgia.
The
over
Big
Texas
12 is
for sure.
Yeah, over Texas for sure. The Big 12 is down. They're just not going to have the opportunities to get big wins like USC can do. You're saying already USC's undefeated. That means week after week of all these teams that are ranked. There's Utah, there's Washington, there's Oregon. It's like maybe you play Oregon State in the championship.
We'll
game.
see who's ranked. None of those teams look very good this weekend.
But they're all ranked, though.
We'll see who stays ranked.
Texas has Oklahoma,
but they beat the Big 12 teams. Like these early games matter because then you look at them later. Like last year, like Oregon. Well, you could always look back at they just got boat raced by Georgia to start the season. This is the year that the Pac-12 went out and won all those big games, especially against the Big 12. So the Pac-12 has the edge on the Big 12 this year. So the Big 12 champion is not going to be ahead of the Pac-12 champion.
I think USC could be better than Texas, but across the country, the College Football Playoff Committee, Texas undefeated, USC's undefeated. They're taking Texas ahead of USC.
Way.
Yes,
this is your first horrible take.
All right, we'll move on. Just to make sure that you did not just. They're not going to like that one.
Is this hook 'em? Yeah, I did this. Hook 'em.
Let's move on before Connor can have another bad take. We've got another caller coming in. Dave from Iowa. Hey, Dave, you're on Tunnel Vision.
Hey guys, Dave from Iowa. Great performance yesterday. Defense really showed up, and I think I speak for all SC fans where this was the kind of defensive performance we expected throughout the first 3 games. And I understand the first 2 games is mixing match, and I get that. But hey, last night's performance, that was kind of the level we expected for 3 consecutive games. But since it's a bye week, I guess I can come in with a different question, so to speak. So last week, Caleb Williams' dad was on the radio and, discussed the idea of, the pros and cons of going number 1 in the NFL draft, and the idea of him potentially, returning for the 2024 season. I'm just curious, if, so to speak, if his dad does want him to leave early, but not be first overall, Do you think he should just tell his son to throw more interceptions, jokingly? I mean, like, you know, it's the number one overall pick. The only person that has, like, in a sense, forced his way into going to the team he wanted to is Eli Manning, which, aside from that, that's the only person that's done that. So what do you think? Do you think, you know, from his father's comments, do you think he stays for the 2024 season?
Thanks for the call, Dave. So here's what he shouldn't do. He shouldn't, like, run around in the pocket, and when there's, like, a little check down, ignores it, runs back around, runs to his right, and then throws a bullet with a weird arm angle to Dorian Singer in the back of the end zone to make every scout that was like, I had him won, but only by like this much of a margin. Then go, oh no, I have him won by this much of a, like you've basically just cemented your place as the number one person, like draft pick. Like there's no question. I don't think there's any way he comes back. I think this is more just sort of like posturing a little bit and just sort of like, oh, just hey, this is something we could do to sort of kind of get what you know, if you don't want to be drafted by a certain team or whatever. I don't think there's really any chance of that. But you got to not do. Throwing more picks isn't going to do it. They just see a throw like that and they're like, yeah, that's the dude we want.
There's these kind of talks every year. Trevor Lawrence had the same talks around him. Hey, is he going to avoid going one so he doesn't go to Jacksonville? Everyone this year is picking the Jaguars to win the AFC South. So I don't think it really matters. You never even really know going into a year who's going to have the number one overall pick. Everyone thought it would be the Bears last year, the Seahawks last year. Seahawks went to the playoffs. Bears people were kind of torn about that one, but they ended up, obviously not making that number one overall pick, and people thought Justin Fields was pretty good. So it's like you never really know. I don't think Caleb Williams is coming back next year. I really don't think there's much that could happen that would make him come back.
Yeah.
I agree. He talks a lot about being immortal and wanting to win that championship to go down in the history books. So if USC falls short of that goal, could that sway him one way or the other? It's possible, but I agree. I just think when you're at the level that he's at, you've shown that you're not too good for college, but you've kind of done everything that you've needed to do. And if you're the number one pick, that's a lot of money on the table. I think he'll be gone too.
All right, we've got a couple more callers in the queue. Thanks, everyone, for calling in.
Thanks
three
for calling,
more.
yeah.
All right, caller, you're on Tunnel Vision.
Hi, guys. This is Dr. K. I should say from Ventura County since Dave says from Iowa. But anyway, I also had the chance to look at Colorado, watch Utah, which I've spent many years watching Utah, and from being up there for many years before we moved down here, and then also Oregon. And I think what I would like to hear is dissect a little bit into the defense of the missed passes that will be caught, the open runs that will be open, especially Utah. They'll run up. And I'm seeing all these better teams to take advantage of what these lesser teams miss and don't have receivers. So just touch base on that and the realism of, yes, we can score 50, 60 points or whatever, but I'm still a little shy about especially the defense.
Thanks, Dr. K. I've watched all those teams, and I think Connor sort of mentioned it earlier. I mean, they're all flawed. Like Washington didn't cover against Tulsa this weekend. They left a lot of points on the table. They went into halftime. Kalen DeBoer wasn't happy. Michael Penix, I think he threw a pick, but they had a couple receivers. Like they're stud receivers. Like you could argue they have almost as good as a receiving room as USC does, and they were dropping balls. This is early in the college football season. Teams are flawed. These other teams that you mentioned, Utah, like they looked a lot better against Florida at home than they did when they were on the road, and they're going to be playing in the Coliseum. Washington struggled. Oregon didn't look that great. I mean, it was a comeback, and then they got a pick six at the very end to make it look a little more respectable. They actually covered the spread at the end with a pick six. Against a team that already lost. Texas Tech lost to Wyoming, right, or something, and
Colorado only won because the quarterback from Nebraska couldn't catch a snap.
Yeah, they were dropping balls all over the place. I mean, I would say that all those teams, I'm really impressed with what Colorado's done, but USC should just still kill them. It's great what Colorado's doing. I think they're going to go on the road to Oregon and really have a hard time, and then USC's going to come in and give them trouble. But I've watched all these teams, and yeah, USC's going to give up some points to some of them, but they're much more flawed than what I've seen from USC, just from checking these teams out. Doesn't mean when USC goes to Eugene that maybe they play worse, but man, I mean, none of them looked all that great. But Washington probably looks the best. Their defense is a little bit better, and their offense is really good. That they struggled a little bit this weekend, even though they scored a lot of points. But yeah, I would say look at all those teams. Sure, USC will give up some drives. You're going to always give up points to teams like that, but they look more flawed than USC.
I agree with all that. Washington's the team that makes me the most nervous if I'm a USC fan, because that offense has the potential not to be as good as USC's, I don't think, but the potential to score points and maybe keep you close with the USC. And then if they do well defensively, that could keep them in the game. It's at the Coliseum, so that's huge. Utah, I don't think it's really fair to judge them until Cam Rising comes back. They've looked lost on offense at times. Looking at Oregon, their offensive line hasn't been very good so far to begin the year. The fact that game is on the road, though, for USC, that could totally change things. Yeah. Bo Nix almost threw an absolutely back-breaking interception against Texas Tech that I thought was going to be upheld, but replay overturned it. So I was surprised to see that. But I just think right now USC looks way better than all of these teams. And could that change? It's possible. But like I said at the beginning of the year, the talent on this USC team, the schedule is hard, but they should beat most of these teams because they're just better and they have a really good coach. And I'm not moving off that after what I saw against Stanford and what I've seen to begin the year, a team that's getting better each week.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, no one's saying it's going to be easy either. You're not expecting this kind of a defensive performance against a team like Utah or Notre Dame or Oregon, for that matter. You're not going to hold them to 10 points. But you just need to make sure you hold them under 50, because USC's offense has a potential to put up 50 every game. A good offense or a good defensive performance against these highly ranked teams is between maybe 24 to 35 points. Like, you could give up 30 points to Utah, and that is a positive defensive day. After the last two games they played against Utah, like that is
you're winning that game.
Like, a good defensive performance against USC is someone only allowing 35 points. Like, that is, if you're able to just slow them down, and that's what USC's been looking for on defense against those great teams. And I think the defenses that slow down good teams are the defenses that shut down bad teams. And USC has shut down two bad teams now in a row after, I think, a little bit of a rusty game against San Jose State where they were clearly pretty antsy to kind of get out there. Marshawn Lloyd talked about it. I think it was kind of the same for every player that was out there on the field. They wanted to prove it, and they were kind of just going a little too hard in week one. But the last 2 weeks, they have shut down bad teams, and I think those defenses are the ones that are able to just slightly limit the good teams. And, we're not talking about a team ranked around 25. Like, these are going to be teams that roll into the Coliseum or that USC has to go on the road to, and they're top 15, top 10. Maybe they're sneaking into the top 8, top 7, something like that when it's Washington or Notre Dame or Oregon. Those are teams that are already just right behind USC right now. So you're not expecting them to go out there and give up 10 points on the road in Eugene. Like, that was never going to happen, and maybe it will, and I'll bite my tongue, and I'm sure USC fans would be happy about that one. But you're looking for a defensive performance where you're around that 30-point mark, maybe a little bit less, because that's what it takes in the modern age of college football with just how good all these offenses are.
Yep. All
right, we've got two more callers in. We've got Gilbert from Sherman Oaks. Hi, Gilbert. You're on Tunnel Vision.
Hi, guys. Long-time viewer and supporter. Anyway, first I'd like to say that last night's drone light show was spectacular. Loved it. Those people that didn't show up for the game last night really missed something spectacular. But my point is, if Caleb decides to come back, well, he's not only the favorite to win the Heisman, but he's the obvious choice to win the Heisman this year. If he were to come back, he would set an unprecedented consecutive triple of winning the Heisman back to back to back, and nobody will ever do that ever again. Just want to hear your comments on that.
I mean, theoretically, yeah. I've heard there was this analyst that when Ron Powlus committed to Notre Dame, he had said that it was this like Homer analyst that was going to win 3 Heismans while he was at Notre Dame. Archie Griffin's the only one that's done the back-to-back. Caleb Williams has a legit shot at that, just because we've talked about this before. His numbers could get better. Like, they were really good last year, and they were the best, but there's room for improvement, and he's already improving on those. I thought, like, having less than 5 interceptions might be tough, but he doesn't have any through the first 3 games. So he's on pace, certainly, to beat that. And USC can win a conference and go to the playoffs, so they can do better as a team. So I feel like that's why he has a good chance at going back-to-back, because there's more upside. Sometimes someone's at the ceiling when they want it, and you're like, there's no way you can beat that. Like, Caleb Williams still has upside. I don't know what it would take to win 3. Like, if he wins the second one, like, he would have to be absolutely, like, never miss a pass, like, and they win a national championship, and then, like, okay, I guess we'll give you the third one. But I don't know, outside of that, like, people don't want to vote for you twice. They're going to look for a reason not to vote for you the third time. So somehow he would have to win at this one, but still have a little bit more bone left. Meat left on the bone. I'm not sure.
There's so much of the season left, but if you project it out a little bit, it is looking pretty good for him right now. I mean, Alabama, their quarterback isn't very good. We saw that against Texas. They don't have that star receiver like they've had in the past, like a Devontae Smith who has won the Heisman. Georgia has a new quarterback. Ohio State has a new quarterback. Getting ahead of myself a little bit, but just looking around college football, starting to feel it out a little bit. Caleb Williams right now is firmly the favorite. Shedeur Sanders might be the number 2 guy right now at Colorado, and I think a lot of people in the chat listening to the show think that they're going to free fall here in a few weeks. I don't know what to make of them right now. I want to see what it looks like against some better teams. I think Shedeur Sanders is a baller, and I've loved what I've seen from him. But if it's Caleb Williams against him, obviously I'd take Caleb Williams. Way too early to be doing this, but if you're just starting to look around a little bit, Caleb Williams has a real good shot to repeat.
And that all the great quarterbacks are in the Pac-12. He gets to play them, you know, and USC is a better team than them. So if he takes care of business, like I think sometimes it's not in your control. I think this is sort of he controls his own destiny because like you'll go beat Colorado, like Shedeur's out, Travis Hunter's out. You beat Washington, Penix is out. You beat Oregon, Nix is out. Like, you can beat a lot of those dudes yourself, and a lot of the blue bloods around the country, like maybe J.J. McCarthy at Michigan or something, but
Quinn Ewers.
There's some, but like a lot of the blue bloods are replacing their quarterbacks, and Bryce Young was the returning guy, and it was Alabama. They kind of fell off a little bit because they had reached a higher point, and USC didn't get to that higher point when Caleb won the Heisman, so they can go up from that. So he's got a really good shot, and I don't want to I think he is in control of it. Where like Matt Leinart, when he was trying to repeat, I don't think he controlled his own destiny because there was all this other stuff going on, and like a teammate could come up and win it too. But I feel like there's as decent shot as any, as good a shot as anyone of repeating since Archie Griffin did, but whatever in the 74, 75 or whatever. So I think he's got as good a shot of anyone. 3. I don't even think about that.
Travis Hunter, Marvin Harrison Jr. are 2 guys just obviously keep an eye on too. And you mentioned Hunter, but if he keeps doing what he's doing on both sides of the ball, that certainly gives him a chance.
There are too many good quarterbacks this year for a non-quarterback to win the Heisman. I have 3 thoughts. I think he does control his own destiny. I think you kind of said it perfectly. I think that if you need some context as to how well he's playing this year compared to last, it took him 4 games to get 9 total touchdowns last year. He did it in 2 games this year. He now has 13 total touchdowns through 8.5 quarters of football. So he's clearly on a better pace. And then third thought is if he wins a second Heisman, there is absolutely 0 chance he's coming back to try and win a third one. So we'll move on to our final caller, but some good hypothetical questions, I think, in this episode. This is Brandon from Minnesota. Hi, Brandon. You're on Tunnel Vision. Brandon, you there?
Oh, sorry, I have myself on mute. Sorry. Calling back for a second time. Sorry to annoy you guys, but question is, Lincoln Riley said last year that we can compete with everyone, but this year, do you think we can beat anyone? And a little quick second question, do you think we don't look past anyone, we're not looking past Arizona State, but do you think they are looking forward to that CU game with all the attention that they're getting? I know they say they don't want to make a statement, but I think we want to make a statement against CU. And
thanks, Brandon. So I would say I do feel like they're just sort of worried about themselves. Like, it's cool. Like, Colorado's a great story, but I don't think it's big enough that it's not bigger than USC's story, at least in USC's mind, that they're like, ooh, we got to go take care of Colorado. Like, I really don't think that's a thing. It's great for college football. It's great for the Pac-12. And USC is going to have a great opportunity to go in there with Ralphie running and all that stuff and do what Nebraska couldn't do and come out on top of that one. But I don't think that's something that they're really focused on.
No, I agree. You know who's going to run the ball down Colorado's throat? Marshawn Lloyd is going to have a huge game against the Buffaloes. They cannot stop the run. You got Caleb Williams throwing the ball, so of course USC won't only rely on the run in that game, but how they performed against TCU running the ball, Jack, you touched on this a few episodes ago, was not good. I think Lincoln Riley will see that, and I expect that game not to go as people think. Like, people are looking at this whole big shootout, really high scoring. I get that. I think USC's defense is a little bit better than people think, and will be able to slow down Colorado. They'll still allow some points, but it won't be this crazy shootout that people think. I think USC will run the ball a little bit too, which will eat some clock.
Yeah, I think TCU was a team that had the talent to beat Colorado, but not the game plan. Nebraska was a team that came in with the game plan to beat Colorado, but just didn't have the talent. And USC is going to be a team that goes in with both, and I think they're going to beat Colorado. But I don't think they're thinking about that game right now. I think they're going to take a rest. They're going to enjoy their bye week. They're going to work hard through it. They're going to go to Tempe, and then they'll start to think about Colorado. I really... I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid on the mentality of this team. Like, they are all bought in. They are all, given the right answers when we ask questions like this.
They've been so well trained.
They clearly are playing for each other. Just, you watch the way they block for each other. You watch the little things, and USC hasn't had players do that in a while. And it's kind of just everyone. So I think I can see why people might think, hey, they're looking ahead. I kind of don't think they are. But we can get on to the last couple of questions we've got on YouTube.
Well, did he have the first part of his question? What was, I forget what that was.
Yeah, it was do you think they're going to look ahead? And then there was one more, wasn't there?
I forget. That's why I don't ask two, especially if you're calling. That's okay. No big deal.
Yeah. All right. Cameron had a question from YouTube. He said, why was Lincoln Riley fuming over the refs yesterday? And then also, which unit is to be blamed for the penalties? I didn't think penalties were too big of a deal yesterday. You had a couple holding on the...
Jalen Smith had a few penalties.
Yeah, the offensive line didn't have any. There was one. I mean, two of them called back touchdowns. So that would be, Marshawn Lloyd had a touchdown called back, and Michael Jackson had his punt return touchdown called back. But it was, I think, listening to Lincoln Riley in the postgame press conference, people were sort of questioning some of the things. Oh, they gave up a bunch of rush yards, and he's like, "What do you want?" I mean, they basically did whatever they wanted to do in the first half. But he wasn't really happy with the way the offensive line played in the second half, and they couldn't really get anything going. And so I feel like he was just coaching to the whistle and really didn't believe that was a touchdown. And there's no reason not to fight every single one of those. And so I feel like he's just like, we are trying to win all the time. There's only 60 minutes in a game. The last time we're going to play this team, we're not throwing in the towel at any point. We're going to just come in and try to win and fight tooth and nail for every yard, and certainly not want to give up a touchdown if you don't think you did. Listen to him in the press conference. He did not believe that was a touchdown. And I got to go back and watch the replay, but I'm not sure what
you could tell on the replay that Lamson was kind of down, and then you see from under the pile the ball sticks out across. Like, you could see it being moved across after he was already down. So I think USC does have a good argument. I also think the Pac-12 has a good argument for not overturning it. It was so late in the game, kind of an inconsequential to the score, and already being a late game. I understand why they didn't fully go through that replay review.
It's a mentality thing, like Ryan
for USC,
said.
I understand.
Lincoln Riley, why was he so upset? He wants to crush everyone with a shoe like they're a piece of gum. He wants to, dominate these teams. He said he didn't want to send a message yesterday, and I'm not going to call him a liar. People have gotten mad at me for trying to read into what he said, but how can last night not have sent a message? Up 49-3 at halftime, that sends a message.
I'm not sure they're trying to send one, but I think they know that if they play their brand of football, it will.
That's going to get people's attention. Yeah,
yes. And that's what he said. He said, we don't have to, try and send a message. Whether you like USC or you hate USC, you're waking up and you're checking USC's score. So I think they've got a pretty good mentality of how to handle that. Blackie Chan asks, what was the play of the game on both sides? And I think that's selling USC a little bit short, because they've talked all about playing with three sides. I think if I were to go with that, I'll say Caleb Williams' run, which was just like quarterback shouldn't be able to do what he did. Pummeling a guy into the end zone, that set the tone for the rest of the game. Then you had, I know it's early as well, but the Max Williams interception, because of how well they played together with Bear Alexander causing the pressure, and then Williams picking it off, and then you had the special teams punt return touchdown.
Yeah, the punt return touchdown, I'll go with the Dorian Singer touchdown pass, because that was just so athletic. And then the Jamil Muhammad strip sack from behind, I'll give that one the defensive play.
Few honorable mentions. Gotta mention Caleb throwing the bomb to Brendan Rice, the 74-yard touchdown.
That was really pretty.
65 in the air, yeah.
What a throw. And then defensively, how about Solomon Byrd's strip sack on Ashton Daniels that Stanford recovered, but it knocked Daniels out of the game. And then we got to see Justin Lamson, who for some reason, he had one completion that was pretty nice, but they were deathly afraid of throwing the ball with him. I felt bad for RJ. He was like, why are they running the quarterback so much? They're going to get this kid killed. He was embarrassed about his alma mater, and I didn't have an answer for him. I did not know why they were so dedicated to running Lamson. I bet he is hurting today.
Yeah. Well, and they would just only run jet sweeps. It was just clear they didn't trust him to run a full offense and throw the ball. He was at one point 1 for 7, and his second completion was a little pop pass.
His first completion was nice.
Yeah, but other than that, he went didn't have another completion after that for quite some time. I think it was late in the third quarter. Danny D on YouTube asks, besides Cobb, what other injured players need to mend during the bye week?
Let's see. Who else was?
Okay. Elijah Hughes went to the.
He did go to the medical
Medical
tent. But I wouldn't say he's a nice to have sort of piece.
Jacoby Covington didn't suit up yesterday, which
was the other one.
We weren't fully expecting that one.
Yeah. Outside of that, I mean, they're relatively healthy. I mean, the fact that Gentry was back, and Chris put in his ghost notes that he saw Gentry. I think he dapped him up or something, and Gentry, he heard him tell somebody, "I'm going today," so he knew it was going to get in there. We saw him. Cobb, I don't know. It's I think he's an important part of this, but the good thing is there's more depth there at the linebacker spot, and the rest of the guys are playing well. Last year, Cobb might have had to play in this game. And this year he didn't have to because you got other guys, especially in the Nevada game. Like, those guys probably would have had to play. You saw Shane Lee playing with a cast on his arm or whatever, a club on his hand. They have much more depth now, so you don't have to do that. But I think Cobb's the big one. I think being a captain, you want to get him back, and especially couple of road games. Any kind of leadership on the road is going to be a big deal. So I think he's the main one.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. We got some rapid fire ones. Mark asks, why did the referees stop the game when the band played Tusk? They didn't stop the game because of that. They stopped the game because the DJ's music was continuing on, and USC got distracted, and so Lincoln Riley was laughing on the sidelines about that. Danny D asks again, besides St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Jerry Rice, Emmitt Smith, Andrew Luck, what other stars were at the game? If you read Chris's ghost notes, there's a kind of a full list. I know Michael Strahan was one of them, wearing a Caleb Williams jersey, which I thought was pretty funny. And then there were a lot of different people that showed up at the game. But Tyreek Hill being there and shouting out Zachariah Branch, that's a pretty cool thing for some of these guys playing in just their third collegiate game.
How about Tyreek Hill today? Are you kidding me?
He had like
200 yards, right?
Wait, how could he be at the USC game last night?
Because they're playing the Chargers.
Oh, yes. Okay. I was like, what? Like, how is this possible? Oh, yeah. Chargers are here.
A pretty cool deal for some of the people, from some of the younger guys in the Coliseum. And then there was one more that I was going to get to. Howell asks, is Dan Weber going to cover any more games this season? Ryan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I full disclosure, I forgot he was coming out for this one. So he's doing some projects out here. But, I walk into the press box, and they're like, oh, is Dan coming? I'm like, I don't think so. I'm like, oh, his name is on the thing. So it's great to have him out. He came out to a practice and stuff, too. I don't think he might – potential for Notre Dame. I think there's potential because he's closer to that one. So that could happen. He did go to Big Ten Media Day, but if there's stuff, I don't think he's coming to the West Coast, but he's had some projects or whatever he was working on out here. So if that's the case, then he'll be able to come out again. But as of now, the plan isn't to have him come out again.
All right, and then we've got one final question. Someone, Leonard asks, with USC on a bye this week, who will you watch this next weekend? I'm not sure I've seen the slate yet, so I don't have a full answer to that.
So the Pac-12 slate.
I'll be watching.
This was a great Pac-12 week, and the Pac-12 went 7-3 out of conference. Baylor, Texas Tech, Auburn, Wisconsin, Michigan, Mississippi State, Oklahoma State, Nebraska. Like, those are the teams the Pac-12 played this. So I tried to watch all those. This week in the Pac-12, it's like Michigan State, and they just lost their head coach. Hawaii, Idaho, Fresno State, UTEP. Colorado State. It's just not that good of a slate. So I'll be able to watch a lot of Pac-12 games, but they don't look – week 2 for the Pac-12 looked great. Week 3 is not so much, and I try to watch a lot of Pac-12 stuff. I don't know outside of that, who are the top – is there not much going on?
I'm looking right now. It's not great.
Yeah, that's why I think game days go into Colorado State, first chance for them to go watch, Dion, and there's just not many games. I mean, you've got Washington and Michigan State, which I think you'd normally think would be a pretty good game, but after – the news today, I'm not sure how good that one's going to be.
Mel Tucker being suspended.
South Carolina, Georgia. You've got what was supposed to be one of the better offenses in the SEC versus probably the best defense in the SEC. I don't know about South Carolina this year, but that's one where you never really know. I think South Carolina gave them a pretty good test last year. Obviously put the hurt on Tennessee last year, so that's could be a good game. Other than that, it's
kind of wish
slim
USC
pickings.
was playing, yeah.
I mean, Tennessee, Florida, you'd think would be a good one, but it's not really. There aren't. I don't think there's a single ranked versus ranked matchup. So you're not going to have the most fun, I don't think, watching college football this week.
Yeah, this past weekend was great.
Yeah, it was a really good week of football.
And with USC in a late game, at least you get to watch some of those earlier ones.
Yeah, so. It would have been nice that they put Alabama Texas next week. Could have watched the whole thing for that one, but instead just got to catch a little bit of it in the press box. But that's kind of all we've got for today. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Thanks to everyone for checking in. If you're watching on our Twitter feed, the live Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, or if you're watching on Facebook. I know on YouTube we had like 550 people watching live. So thanks so much for doing that, hitting the like button, telling your friends about it, subscribe. We really appreciate it. And if you want to go over to uscfootball.com, sign up for a VIP membership. You can get 30% off for $1 for your first month. You will not regret it. The amount of content going up is absolutely insane. It's hard to even keep up. So if you love USC football, you're here watching us while there's a blowout going on Sunday Night Football.
NFL equivalent of last night.
Yeah, it's really bad. Thank you for being with us, but make sure you go check out the site. There's tons of stuff going on there. The Peristyle community is amazing. If you like interacting on the chat here, the Peristyle, it's absolutely insane. You'll love it. So make sure you go check that out.
Yeah, really got to shout out some specific pieces. Connor has a great article about Zachariah Branch. Chris wrote what he thought is maybe the longest ghost notes of his life for the game yesterday with some really interesting insight. RJ had that great article about the killer instinct. Dan wrote a column for coming to his first USC game since the Cotton Bowl that Sam Darnold played against Ohio State. So his thoughts of kind of looking at USC football in person for the first time since that was during the Clay Helton era, before everything went to shit, and his kind of first-hand view of that. So there's some excellent stuff on the site right now, including Connor's article as well.
Thank you, Jack. And to wrap up the question about all the games, Fresno State, Arizona State, 7:30 Saturday night. You can see.
It's on the Pac-12 network?
Yeah. FS1.
Oh, there you go. So you can see it, actually.
Yeah, and you can see USC's next opponent play. Fresno State is actually going to be good. They could be ranked in the future, so I think they'll beat Arizona State.
Yeah, Jeff Tedford, good coach. Arizona State's not looked that good. They beat a FCS team by 3.
But besides that, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Stay away.
It's not a very good site. And happy belated birthday to our beloved Jack.
Thank you.
Who's now
appreciate that.
Counting down till he can legally drink.
Yeah, exactly. Also 2 different podcasts to listen to today as well. Obviously, we mentioned that interview with Taj Washington. Ryan had the coach interview with Harvey Hyde. And then it's going to be a pretty interesting Pac-12 Podcast Champions episode this week because you'll get to talk about this USC-Stanford matchup as well as 8 different Pac-12 teams are in the rankings, which is the most of all time.
Yeah.
I was surprised that Washington State cracked in. I thought UCLA should have been in last week. So the fact that now they're both in there alongside Colorado and everyone else it is a pretty wild week to be in Pac-12 football. And, of course, the one Pac-12 on Pac-12 game we've gotten hasn't exactly lived up to that hype, but a really good year for the conference. But that's all we've got for you guys today. For Ryan Abraham and Connor Morrissette, I'm Jack Smith. Thank you so much for watching Tunnel Vision. All right, will we be here next week without a game?
So not preview Thursday. We'll see about Sunday. We'll see what you guys are feeling. Maybe we'll do a kind of
react to the terrible games of Saturday.
Maybe we'll do something like that. Yeah.
But thank you guys. So thank you guys so much for watching. At the very worst, we will be back here in a couple Thursdays to preview USC's matchup against Arizona State in Tempe. But thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed the game yesterday against Stanford, and we'll see you at least in a